Well, I'm a first world person and I live in the first world, and I have a first world complaint. I don't like the way that mysteries are being unfolded. I think something needs to be done about this. Legislation, perhaps. For instance, I remember being a young child in the planetarium and thinking, man, if they find water on Mars, wouldn't that be amazing? And then we find out chemical traces similar to water may be found, and then we found that possible water vapor may be found, and then we found this. And the announcement that there's water on Mars now means nothing because it took 30 years to find it out. And it looks like we just had that exact same situation, but it seems to me to finally crossed a point where I think we can say with complete confidence that we know what happened to Amelia Earhart. And unfortunately, it was probably worse than what we'd assumed happened, which was that she just simply went into the ocean. Here's the short form. When she was making her around-the-world trip, she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, basically disappeared into history, and nobody knows what happened to her for the longest time. But over the course of the last 20 or 30 years, incrementally, the evidence has been increasing that she actually crash-landed on a tiny and strange-looking little Pacific island called Nikumororo. It's a big island, except it's hollow, so it's a small island. And here's what they found on the island that makes people believe that this is, in fact, where Amelia Earhart is, in fact, story ends. They found pieces of aluminum that are similar, identical to the kind of aluminum that made up her airplane. They found little bottles of anti-freckle ointment from the exact same period in time that she was known to use. They found women's shoes. They found, in a strange photograph taken much later, not even aware that she might even have been on this island, a photograph of a shipwreck that includes, way off in the corner, something metallic sticking out of the water, which turns out looks an awful lot like a piece of landing gear from the airplane she was flying. And then finally, they had found some bones in 1940. A doctor had looked at the bones, I want to say an army surgeon, I think, and basically determined that they were the bones from a man. And so we do not have the bones of Amelia Earhart, because then we could answer this question with 100% certainty. But he did take extremely accurate measurements, and he was determined, and his determination was that these bones were the bones of a male. But recently, with such advances in forensic science, a team of people has done a reanalysis of those bone measurements and have concluded that there is a 95 to 99% chance that these are the bones of a person, of female, of Amelia Earhart's age and height and background genetically and so on. So we know where she is, finally, I think we can say with some confidence. Steve, the evidence seems to indicate that at least Earhart and maybe Fred Noonan survived the crash. She certainly did. And that they spent some time together on the island. They found some campfires, they found some bones, some things used to collect water and so on. But that she simply expired, perhaps she was injured or so on. And she just died a castaway on this island, probably the most famous woman in the world at the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of a worse ending than that sense of her flying off into the fog, right? That's how Hollywood would have made the movie. She would have flown off into a cloud bank, and now we find out that's not what happened at all.
Yeah. We live in such a wonderful, remarkable age with our technological achievements and all the rest, but it takes some of the mystery out of life. You know, Tinder has killed seduction. These studies have. Forensic studies are taking mysteries away, and maybe it's good that we know what happened to Amelia Earhart. But
I think it's good.
I don't want to think of the person slowly dying of exposure on a castaway island. I always think it's one of my favorite pictures in history, and it's that famous one of Amelia Earhart. It's kind of over her shoulder, her chin's pointed up. She's got that huge smile, just full of hope and adventure, and the windswept hair. That is how I like to think of Amelia Earhart, that no matter what her actual fate may have been, that competent, daring, adventurous woman with the big smile and the windswept hair was at the controls until the very last instant, at which point, as you say, the fog rolls in. the cowboy rides off into the sunset. But that open, mysterious ending that allows us to use our imagination, and instead of seeing two people dying of thirst on a desert island, that's a horrible way to go. And I choose to ignore this study completely, and to picture in my mind that photograph of that amazing woman.
Not to pile too much on the macabre side of this, but one of the reasons that they did not find an extant body, only bones, was they think that the remains were scattered by crabs, by land crabs. And I thought, okay, land crabs. And then I saw a picture of the land crabs, which are the size of dogs. I mean, these are just shockingly huge things. That's a fairly horrible ending to this story, Scott. But here's something I'd like to get your opinion on. When Amelia Earhart gained fame for doing daring things, first women to do daring things, but they were daring things done by men just a few years earlier. And flying around the globe at the time she did it was a dangerous and daring thing to do. And I think the point here is that certainly the two people on board this aircraft, before they took off on the first part of their flight, must have at least on some level said to themselves, this is not going to automatically end with a ticker tape parade in New York City, right? This could end up very badly. And on some level, it impresses me even more that they did what they did, because this ending was certainly one of the potential endings to this around the world flight. And if there hadn't been this kind of an ending possible, then I don't think she would have deserved the acclaim that she got.
I think there's something even more poignant about this than our previous fantasy that the disillusioned but still persistent Stephen Green clings to, this I think it makes her more relatable, because even
humanizes her. Yeah,
even people who do daring deeds, you realize, spend 99% of their lives doing mundane things like trying to get a drink of water. And I don't mean just for survival's sake. Like, most of the people that we admire, that we see doing great things, that are celebrities or athletes or just, bold adventurers, the Richard Bransons of the world, really spend a large part of their life engaged in the mundane. And there's something charming about that. Now, when you were talking about like this how flight is different now than it was then, and it was a much more dangerous. I'm thinking people watching this are the kind of people who are like, you can picture Amelia Earhart and Fred, talking in the cockpit, going, "Ugh, first we got stuck on the tarmac for like 45 minutes. And then
our bags are taking forever.
Then I found out that my Kindle was in my checked luggage and I couldn't get it for the entire flight." And the fish was awful. So,
yeah.
We can't even understand the mindset of a person who would go, hey, let's do something so daring that we probably going to get killed doing it. I read a quote from Elon Musk today, who said that the first people who go to Mars, it's a pretty fair chance that they're going to die in the attempt, and that kind of attitude, of adventure is something that I think we need to rekindle. But I also think that there's, we can fantasize so much about these bold, daring adventurers that we forget that they're people like us. They're people who get up and brush their teeth and iron a shirt and go to work and do mostly mundane things most of the time. But every once in a while, they roar like lions. Every once in a while, they break through the mundane and do something extraordinary. And it may be in your case that that's something that doesn't get beyond the reach of the ears of the people under your roof. But it may be someday that you'll make a difference that will literally change the world.
I'm very glad you mentioned that Musk quote. I hadn't heard it. But the outcome that Amelia Earhart ultimately met was also a possible outcome of all of the Apollo missions. They could have found themselves a real possibility surviving a landing on the moon and then without the ability to get back off the ground. And they're just stuck there. And that's just the way the story ends. There's so much about this that's so interesting to me. There was reports after she disappeared of radio transmissions, shortwave radio. Somebody in Cleveland, perhaps, or Ohio or something, hears a voice from the other side of the world saying, this is Amelia Earhart, blah, blah, blah. And it seemed to me like, oh, that just can't be true. maybe it was true. There have been some real consideration about how good a pilot was she actually. You know, that she didn't really filled with tremendous flying skills. But I'll tell you what, it looks like she managed to put a twin-engine airplane down on a beach in such a perfect place that she was able to salvage stuff from the airplane, get it onto the island, and so it was near enough to the island so that it didn't sink, but not so far away that she couldn't get her stuff out. That's a real piece of flying. Yeah. And I am glad that we found out the end of the story to her, because as both of you have said, it reduces her from this mythical elegance. And that's what it is. It's an elegant ending to fly off into the fog bank. There's nothing elegant about this at all. It's horrible and it's real and it actually happened. It makes you wonder what she was thinking in those final days on the island. But as Scott and Steve both pointed out, I suspect that if you have the courage to set off on that journey in the first place, you also have the courage to face the consequences of it. And consequences often do accrue to situations like this. I'm glad I know where she is. I'm glad I know where the campsite was on Nikumaroro. I'm glad that a team of people in an organization called Tigar have spent 20, 30 years and a lot of money trying to find the answer to this question. And the only other thing I'll say about it is it makes you wonder how many other mysteries happen every day. How many disappearances, how many people simply vanish into the fogs, people with no names, people with no celebrity connections, non-famous people disappear. And I imagine every one of those people and their families would like this kind of closure as well. So Amelia Earhart, looks like she's been found, and I'm glad they did. And I admire her even more now than I did before. Right Angle is made possible by the paying members here at BillWhittle.com who have kept us going throughout these many years and hopefully will continue to do so. And if you'd like to be a part of that, we certainly could use your support. I'm Bill Whittle with Steve Green and Scott Ott. We'll see you next week on Right Angle.